Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game where we're covering the first encounter of Nepomniachtchi and the Magnus Carlsen, so the world champion and the World Chess Championship challenger for 2021. That will happen in November in Dubai, and this comes as a suggestion from Rukil Shukla. It's a game we haven't covered yet, and it's quite a nice one. And even though this is not exactly how they looked like in 2002, they were a little bit they were not 12 yet, they were 11 something. This is what they actually look like, but I couldn't find a nice enough photo to use as a profile image for them, for the two little photos on the left of the board. But this is how they actually looked. This is Magnus and Nepo, the two gentlemen on the far right. There you can see on the first from the right is Nepo, then it's Magnus. That's approximately what they looked like at that time. And that's David Howell, the tall dude in the middle, and I believe next to him is Dmitry Andreikin, and I do not know the two on the left. But yeah, this is what they actually look like, but those, if I use that as a profile photo, it'd be very, very low quality, so that's why I'm showing this to you. And that's why I'm using these ones. I thought maybe I'd use ones where they're grown up, but I decided against it. So basically, this is what you see, but imagine that while you're watching the game. So, like I said, the Under-12 European Championship played in Peniscola, Spain, and this is a game from round 5, a very nice one. So let's see what happened in their first encounter and whether they even imagined that that one day, this, like I said, it was almost 20 years ago, would be a precursor to the World Chess Championship match. So Nepo with the white pieces opens with e4. Magnus goes for knight to f6. He goes for the Alekhine's defense. We have e5 attacking that knight, knight to d5, and now knight to f3. We have d6 immediately challenging this pawn on e5, and now d4. Nepo defends it. We have captures on e5, and now knight captures on e5. So the Larsen variation of the Alekhine's defense. We have g6. Magnus prepares to fianchetto the dark square bishop, and now bishop to c4. Attacking the knight, and usually in some lines this knight will come to b6 to kick away the bishop, but here of course it'd be a terrible mistake as you'd get checkmated like this. So instead Magnus defends it with c6. We have knight to c3, again the knight cannot move, and now bishop to e6, for the moment blocking the development of your e6 pawn, but Magnus has everything taken care of, as you'll see in the game. So here Nepo castles, and here there are a few games where bishop to g7 was played, but as of knight to d7 we have a position that has never been reached again since 2002. So here knight to d7, we have queen to f3, Nepo going very aggressive with his development, and bishop to g7 now by Magnus. The knight is now attacked twice, so we need to defend it. So rook to e1 by Nepo, and Magnus castles now, and queen to g3. So here you can now start advancing your f-pawn, maybe to add more protection to the center, but here Magnus just goes on a capture fest, and he completely simplifies the position. He plays knight captures on e5, d captures, we have knight captures on c3, queen captures, queen captures on c3, and now bishop captures on c4. So trading 3 of the minor pieces in the center, and immediately queen to d5, going after this queen trade. Now asking, what do you want to do? So if Nepo trades here, which is definitely possible, then captures, Magnus will play e6, and it's pretty much a drawn game. Not much to be done about this. It's even black who has the semi-open c file, so you can maybe even nicely double up here on the c file, but still it's very unlikely that either players would be able to do anything here. So instead, after queen to d5, we have queen back to e2. Nepo wants to keep the queens on the board, and now rook 8 to d8. Magnus grabs hold of the d file, so you don't have any rook to d1 ideas in the future, or maybe even developing the bishop and rook to d1. So here bishop to g5, attacking the e7 pawn, and now while Magnus could defend it with the rook, for example, he decides to do it with queen to e6. That rook 8 to d1 does not come with an attack on the queen, and the queen is very much safe here. So here we have queen to e3. If you go over aggressive with f4, then Magnus has some h6 resources, and after bishop h4, maybe queen to d4, and it's well, it's a very tricky position. Then the f4 pawn is under attack, then rook f to d8 is coming, and black does get some initiative going on. So instead, after queen to e6, we have queen to e3 by Nepo. Now, not only defending the bishop, preparing bishop to h6, maybe to trade off this guy here, but also just plainly attacking the a7 pawn. So here, Magnus defends it, b6, and now a4. Nepo wants to play a5 and bust open the queen side here. We have rook to d5, Magnus defending the f5 square, and now bishop to f4. So what do you play here? Magnus goes queen to f5, improves the activity of the queen. He has e6 ready, rook f to d8 is ready, queen is attacking the c2 pawn, all of this is ready. So Nepo now offers a queen trade with queen to e4, but now it's Magnus who declines the queen trade, and he simply keeps his control of the d file. Now queen to d7, so rook is not coming to d1 anytime soon, and now c3. So what do you play here? Magnus just brings another rook into the game. So rook f to d8. Now we have this nice rook, queen, rook sandwich on the d file. We have h3, some breathing room for the king, and now comes queen to e6. Still, you could play e6, but Magnus is still reluctant to push this pawn. For the moment, he's keeping it there. And now there's a triple attack on this e5 pawn. So here, queen to e2. Now he says, okay, I might be interested in infiltrating with queen to a6, going after your queenside pawns. So here, Magnus just defends against it. So rook to d3, and now a5. Finally, Nepo gets that pawn to a5. We have b5, Magnus blocks this, and now even a6. So grabbing a lot of space here on the queen side. Magnus says, all right, I'm going to do the same. He pushes c5, and now you will have ideas in the future, maybe b4, maybe just c4, cementing that rook on d3. So queen to e4 by Magnus. Now, again, with some ideas of maybe queen to b7, going after the a7 pawn and the b5 pawn. And here, Magnus just goes queen to d5 and offers a queen trade. And it's only now that Nepo accepts this queen trade. So queen captures, rook captures on d5, and now rook to a5, going after this b5 pawn. So we have an endgame here, two rooks against two rooks and a bishop pair each. The b5 pawn is under attack, so c4 defends the pawn, and now king to f1. Nepo starts bringing the king into the game. Finally, e6 by Magnus, and now bishop back to e3. Goes after the a7 pawn. So Magnus defends it. We have rook 8 to d7, and now bishop to d4. And if you look at the position now, it doesn't really appear that something can be done here. This is a monster chain here. It's very unlikely that you will be able to break this. The f6 square is supported twice by the pawn and by the bishop. There's really not much you can do here. So here, Magnus played bishop to f8. He may be thinking about something like bishop to c5, maybe to add another attacker to the d4 square. But now Nepo has a very, very interesting idea. And often when you have to look for such ideas, you have to look for breakthroughs. And what kind of breakthroughs are here in the position? Well, obviously, there aren't any breakthroughs on the king's side. You can't really push this. The f5 square is defended twice. You can't really push this pawn. If you push this pawn, you can trade it, but that's pretty much it. So one thing you could consider is b3, and this is exactly what Nepo does. First, he plays rook to b1, and now b3 is coming. And now Magnus could have just continued with his plan of bishop to c5, and this probably is the way to go. It includes a temporary pawn sacrifice here, but it doesn't really matter. Bishop captures, and now after, for example, captures, and captures, we're going to capture on d4, and now we have this endgame that's pretty much will be a draw if played correctly. But okay, after rook to b1, we have bishop to e7 by Magnus, and now Nepo uses this to, of course, break through on the queen side. He plays b3. We have bishop to d8, now attacking the rook here, rook to a2, and now rook captures on d4. This was Carlsen's idea. Not interested in a draw, he's going for a win with the black pieces. So here c captures, and now c3, creating a very, very strong passed pawn here that will probably... it will probably be possible to escort the pawn. You could capture here, maybe you could play rook here, maybe you can bring the bishop to g5 to guard the queening square. So there are some very interesting possibilities here, but one thing Nepo doesn't want to allow is Magnus to play b4 here. So he plays b4 instead of Magnus. A very rare occasion where b4 is actually good for both players. So here we have bishop to g5. If Magnus goes for the d4 pawn, I know you guys are watching what happens if he just grabs the pawn. Then we go after this pawn, for example, rook c2, and once this pawn is defended, and there really aren't all that many great squares for you to defend it from, let's say you go here, then just king to e2, and you have to move the rook. And if you go for something like rook to c4, then rook to b3, and we're still gonna pick up this pawn. There's really nothing you can do about this. So instead, after b4, we have bishop to g5 by Magnus, now just guarding the queening square, and now comes a rook to d1. Nepo defends this pawn, we have rook to c7 preparing to push the pawn, and of course Nepo cannot allow this pawn push. So rook to c2, and now Magnus goes for bishop to e7, goes after this b4 pawn, but now the position is completely winning for Nepo, so feel free to pause the video here and win this game for Nepo and win the first game the two of them have ever played, while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on not doing anything weird like, I don't know, rook to a1. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's of course d5. I know you guys were looking at b4, but there's already a pawn on b4, so you had to look for something else. But in this game, it's actually d5. And d5 is an incredibly strong move because if you don't do anything, then d6 is coming. So you have to do something. Problem is, if you capture here, it doesn't really help you. Just rook captures, and now this pawn is under attack, and then rook b7 comes, and then your entire position just falls apart. For example, bishop captures on b4, we're gonna capture on b5, attack the bishop, and once the bishop moves, doesn't really matter where, rook to b7. Of course, we have to decline the trade. If we trade, it's just game over. The pawn promotes to a queen. So we'd have to move it, let's say rook here, and then we're just going to capture this pawn, move the rook, and then we have a nice past a pawn. And with being up so much material, this is a completely winning game for white. So instead, after this d5 move, Magnus tried bishop captures on b4, but now Nepo just pushes d6, and now he has a monster passed pawn here. We have rook to c8, and here we have rook to b1 by Nepo, and it was in this position on move 41 that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game, and their first ever game that the two of them have ever played in the European Youth Championship of 2002 goes to Jan Nepomniachtchi. So here you resign because the bishop is under attack. If the bishop moves, you lose the b5 pawn, and that's pretty much it. If you go to c5, then we can even grab this pawn because now there's not much you can do here. And other than that, you really have no moves. If you play this, then you lose this pawn. Again, we're gonna go to b7. If you play bishop to b6, we can even play rook captures on b6. Even this is possible. For example, pawn captures, we're gonna play a7, and now at any point this is simply unplayable. We're threatening rook captures here. If you capture, we're going to bring a queen into the game, and anything other than that simply doesn't work. If king to g7, we're just going to play d7, and this is impossible to hold. Whatever you do, rook captures is coming, and then we're gonna start promoting some queens. So yeah, Magnus of course knew this. After rook to b1, he resigned, and what a great victory for Jan Nepomniachtchi. Even though Magnus did have a lot of ways to draw this game, but he decided to sacrifice the exchange and go for a full victory, which cost him in the end because he did not win the European Under-12 Championship, but neither did Nepo. The winner of this Under-12 European Championship was actually Dmitry Andreikhin. Nepo got second place and Magnus got fourth. Yeah, very, very interesting stuff. And so you guys don't forget, this is them at this age. So when they were playing this game, this is who they were. So in case you've seen some very, very strong moves, in case you were imagining old Magnus and old Nepo. Nope, these two gentlemen played those moves. Yeah, that's very, very scary, I know. But yeah. that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for recommending such a nice game. Always use hashtag suggestions so I can spot your suggestions easier. We're gonna keep finding nice games between Magnus and Nepo up until the World Chess Championship match, while we cover everything else that's happening in the chess world. Once again, I would like to thank Austin Del Rio, Justin Brockhouse, Frederick Rusek, Akram the Pilot, and KD Nuggets for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Morphy saga, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.